Welcome back to the channel. My name is Usman. Today I am joined by a really special guest. It is George from 1573 Cigars.
That's me.
George, great to have you here at the Leeds Cigars Lounge. Thank you for making the journey up. How was the trip up here?
It was very relaxing, thank you. It was very relaxing. Lovely, beautiful countryside. You know, being based in London, it's easy to forget just how much beautiful countryside there is in the UK, and it's there. Fantastic. And then Leeds, fantastic place. I love it here. You know, I haven't been in a decade.
It's been a while.
I'll be back much sooner.
Yes,
So,
because you're coming back in August for the event over here, aren't you?
Yep, absolutely. August the 3rd.
August
Here.
3rd.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So I want to talk about what you've done, you know, what you've managed in the last like 2 or 3 months, which in all honesty, I'm thoroughly impressed by, because what you've achieved is no short of, I don't want to say miracle, but whatever word is just slightly under that, which doesn't require God's intervention. So I can't think of the word, but I'm sure there's something there, probably in German, some description, some descriptive word. But what you've managed in the last few months is fucking incredible. Sorry for the language, but
Thank
it
you.
is
Thank you.
immensely incredible. I'm so impressed. You've
That's
managed
really
to import a cigar brand into the country, and you managed to put those cigars on the shelves of virtually every major retailer in the country, and you've managed this in like 2 months, is it?
Yeah, 2.5 months. So,
Wow. How did that even happen? Like, how did you manage to get it up on every shelf in 2 months?
That's a very good question. I mean, the brand itself, Foundation Cigars. Now, Foundation really speak for themselves. You know, the story behind the brand, the story of Nicholas Melillo, it really brings a sense of how special the cigars are. But alongside the incredible nature of the cigars themselves, it's also a testament to the UK cigar industry. Because the UK cigar industry isn't really so much about cigars, it's about each individual experience. It's about each individual person.
Interesting.
And the UK cigar industry is the greatest collection of characters of fantastic nature. And it's been a pleasure to work with everyone. I've been in the cigar industry for 9 years now in the UK.
Yes.
And
So briefly, would you mind just going over, you know, what you did for the last 9 years? So you used to work at a retailer. You said you worked at Casa, then JJ Fox. So do you mind just very briefly going, because I want to talk more about the importing side of your new business and what you've done and what you are doing at the moment. But just for the sake of, like, you know, a little background, do you mind just quickly going over what you know, who you are, what you've done and everything?
Of course. I started working at what was called Casa at the time, which was on Wardour Street in Soho in London. And although I'd smoked cigars, I hadn't really been quite that immersed in a cigar community. And within the first week, I realised just how special a community cigars can create. You know, that sense of almost honour amongst your fellow people.
Yes.
That sense of true equality in the sense that people listen to each other, you know. And that sense of healthy debate as well is a really key part of, you know, the cigar community and friendship.
Absolutely.
And I learnt that quite quickly at Casa. Then I also learnt that the cigars themselves are pretty amazing things, truly incredible. And then I went on to work at James J. Fox, where I specialised in vintage and rare cigars. And then last year, in 2022, I left and we created this company, 1573. So with my 2 business partners, Winston and Damo.
So there's 3 co-founders in the company.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I really want to get into today is I want to talk about what it takes to start a cigar importing business in the UK. Because this is something which is unusual I mean, the cigar industry is a niche industry at best. I mean, it's a cottage industry. It's a tiny industry in the grand scheme of things. It's, you know, especially in the UK market, it's not a huge industry. It's a tiny sub-segment of a segment, right?
Yeah.
And being an importer in this industry is one of those really cool, interesting things which I don't think a lot of people ever think about or ever consider. And starting an importing business, one, you know, did you not have enough problems in your life or something like? but I also want to get into like a little bit of the nitty gritty. I mean, we're not going to go, you know, into like any private information, but I would like to, if you don't mind, I would like to get into some of the nitty gritty of starting an importing business, or what it's like to build that relationship with, you know, the company, because the company in question here today is Foundation Cigars, and I've been smoking the Tabernacle. This is the only cigar I've been smoking because this cigar is so damn good. I don't want to try the others just yet. So I'm just I'm indulging in this one cigar, and that's what I'm doing at the moment. But, you know, let's start from the beginner. How does, you know, something like this even come about? Like, did you just wake up one morning and think, I want to start importing cigars, or did you have a relationship with the brand already? You know, how does someone, if someone was, you know, about to start an importing company, how do they even begin? How do they start?
It's a very good question. The big sort of point there is, where did it start? There are many points it could have started. There are many points you could say it did start. But we're already working and talking with Nick about working on some other things.
Okay.
And then the question of Foundation Cigars coming into the UK came up. And we sat down and we figured out we really want to see Foundation Cigars in the UK. So Foundation are a brand that are really close to my heart. Nick is a fantastic, really upstanding guy, you know, and is an absolute genius. And it's been a real shame that his cigars aren't on the shelves here. So how could we do that? And it took quite a lot of work and consideration, and it also took a lot of people saying that we wouldn't be able to do this.
I can imagine, yes. I mean, the challenge is, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. I imagine I'm quite annoying sometimes because, in fact, I know I'm quite annoying sometimes. I don't have to imagine that. But in the sense that quite often when I'm told that I can't do something or I won't be able to do something, I will have to then, therefore, go and find a way to do that thing.
Yes.
The way that I like to approach any new challenge is looking at it completely as if you know nothing, a true beginner's mind, and taking it every step by step and finding possibly alternative routes to do things. And that's how we came to bringing in, being just a small importer, we just bring in Foundation Cigars. We just work with them.
So how did you build that relationship with Foundation? Did you know Nick before, or, you know, how did that introduction happen? Because if I'm not mistaken, Foundation Cigars were attempted a few years ago. Someone attempted to bring them into the country as an importer. Didn't quite work out. Nick felt like he might have been a bit burnt about it. As far as I could be wrong, but, you know, it kind of left a bad impression. So he wasn't keen on bringing his cigars back in the country as much as he wanted to. The experience left him in a place where he was kind of like, well, you know, I'm happy where I am with the US market, because the US market is, let's be honest, it's ridiculously huge. So he was quite content with where things were.
Yeah.
So did you know Nick for a long time, or how did that relationship turn into you starting to import cigars for him?
Well, it happened very organically. You know, we've been chatting with Nick since 2020, and I've known Nick's cigars from when they were released, 2015. I've loved Nick's cigars since then. I've known of Nick. I'd met him a couple of times. I'd met him before when his line Highclere Castle came into the UK before. and it really went from there. And the moment we started speaking with Nick, we realised we were really on the same level
Yeah.
about many things. We're very fortunate in the way that I think we have a very similar passion as do you for the cigar industry and for cigars themselves. And it just took off from there very organically, really.
See, it was you already kind of were in discussions with him, or you were talking to him. Maybe not as a, maybe not as someone who's wanting to import cigars, but it was just a relationship. You were just talking to the person, and
yeah.
I mean, I guess a lot of business is done just by getting to know someone, isn't it?
It is.
And it's crazy how I think a lot of people don't value just that, how important it is just to have a conversation with someone and, you know, just get to know people. And because people only want to do business with people they trust, generally speaking anyway. So that relationship building over the last like 8 or 9 years, where you've been experiencing Foundation Cigars, and then it seems to me like question came up. So who kind of brought up the question? You know, was it your idea? Was it their idea? How did that happen? You know, did they approach you and say, hey, you know, we like you. Do you mind importing our cigars in the country?
Yeah.
Is that literally what happened?
Yeah.
That's literally what happened. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to take credit. I'm not going to take credit for that because essentially Nick wanted his cigars on the shelf in the UK. I think, and I'm very grateful for the fact that he understood who and understands who we are. He understands our principles, our core principles. And I think, yeah, he said, basically, let's get Foundation Cigars in the UK. And we sat down, we figured out how to do that logistically, and we took it from there.
How do you do it logistically? What are the logistics involved in doing? I mean, I know I'm going into the nitty gritty, but I want to get into like some of the details. So how do you arrange the? I can imagine. So
yeah, there are a huge amount of regulations to meet, and so forth. There are at both ends, really. So there are a lot of import regulations, there are a lot of regulations around setting up the company, so forth. I can't take credit for all of these regulations. And
a good lawyer and a good accountant, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, you need a good lawyer and a good accountant. But but as with anything, it seems quite daunting as an overall prospect.
Yeah.
Importing anything seems quite daunting. But when you break it down into the very smaller steps, everything is a very tiny step.
Yeah.
And then that's broken down into tiny steps. It's actually quite a clear, straightforward process.
Interesting.
It's the same thing with most things. Regulations, you know, many people understandably find regulation very, very scary. But if you look at that completely with a clear and open a beginner's mind and break it down into step by step and tick every tiny little box, then that's simply all that's requested.
So is it just a matter of bureaucracy and just a bunch of paperwork?
A huge amount of
paperwork.
Yeah. A huge amount of paperwork, a huge amount of bureaucracy.
So the paperwork doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
No. But I've had really good partners in helping us with that, and I'm very grateful for them.
Were you always keen on Foundation Cigars, or from the conversation that we had, the first time you smoked a Foundation cigar was in 2015. Do you remember which cigar you smoked and what impression you made?
I do. It was either late 15, early 16, I believe.
Yeah.
And I only ever smoked Cuban cigars, right?
Well, you worked at JJ Fox, so
Well, at the time I was at Casa, so it was we only stocked Cuban cigars, right? And before that, I only smoked Cuban cigars.
So what kind of Cuban cigar smoker were you? Were you like, never try a new world?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I'd try them. I'd smoke a few millimeters, and then
a few millimeters.
Yeah. And then I go, this isn't for me. It's not Cuban, and I wouldn't smoke it, right? And then someone who was both a friend of mine and a customer came into the shop, and he gave me a cigar, and he said, "Do me a favour, George. Just smoke this." Right, and let me know what you think.
Yeah.
And so I went for a walk through the park, and I smoked this cigar. And that was the cigar that convinced me that Nicaraguan, Dominican, Honduran, the rest of the world is worth smoking. That one
Absolutely,
cigar.
yeah.
And that cigar was the foundation El Luense.
Wow.
And so it really holds a very special, particularly that cigar holds a really very special part in my cigar journey personally. Because that opened up, you know, thousands of other brands, thousands of other cigars.
I can imagine, yeah.
But the interesting thing is I always came back to Foundation, you know, because as we were saying earlier, actually, as we were talking about earlier, Foundation was a brand that I'd had such a special experience with that El Luense. I didn't ever think that any of their other brands would be that good, right?
Yeah.
And then next I smoked the Tabernacle, yeah, and it was just as good,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it's
I
the one
smoked-
that I'm indulging
Yeah.
in the most at the moment. I mean, this cigar is phenomenal. It's it's different. It's very different from what I would normally smoke. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that in a positively good way, in every sense of the way. It is an excellent cigar in terms of construction, in terms of draw. I mean, I bitch about draw quite a lot. I complain about that. I mean, Ray sat just over there, and the amount of times I complain about draw, not in the way that you think, because a lot of people think that, oh, I'm complaining about draw because it's too tight. No.
Yeah.
I complain about draw being too loose. I need a cigar with like a good firm draw, and this cigar, every
Yep.
single one that I've smoked, firm draw, well packed, heavy on the pack. I love that. And the flavors, it's like the flavor profile on this cigar, in my view, is that it's heavily saturated, but in the best way possible. Like all the flavor notes are clear, they're crisp, they're easy to understand.
Yeah.
Like at every point, the cigar, you know exactly what it's telling you, and I'm enjoying the hell out of it. A
Thank
little
you.
bit stronger than what I'm used to.
Yes.
So that's the only thing.
It's fairly full in body, but you're right. It's that balance. That's what Nick is really renowned for. Therefore, Foundation are really renowned for. Is balance in blending. Every single part of that flavor profile is carefully balanced by something else.
Yeah.
And that brings a sense of clarity. You know, that brings a sense of clarity. It's like within your life, if your life is out of balance, you know, then you can feel as if you're living in a fog. And you might not need to remove some stress, but rather balance it by something else.
Yes.
And then you will achieve clarity in the center. And that is, you know, that's exactly what Foundation do. That's what Nick does. It's amazing.
How long have Foundation cigars been in the country then?
Foundation
Was
cigars.
there a set date when they were launched in this country? Because I can't remember a particular day. Like, you know, I just walked in the store one day and they were there on the shelves. You know,
So they've been really since late March.
late March.
Yeah, really since.
So
late
did you
March.
bring them in? Like, did you have them in like a holding warehouse or something, or are you literally just shipping them over and then putting them onto the stores?
So we do have, obviously we have inventory stock and we have warehousing. Yeah, that's the way we do it. So, because if you rely on just shipments from Nicaragua to fulfill, you know, shops' orders,
It's not gonna work.
really not good for shops.
No.
Because people can place orders, but how long does the shipment take from Nicaragua? In theory, it takes 3 days, right? But in reality, you know,
With customs, duties, and
Yeah.
everything that you got to invest about.
and
How
getting
long does it
certificates,
take?
phytosanitary certificates, your one certificates, it takes a little bit of time. So
What's the
inventory stock.
average amount of time on an order? How long does it actually take to get cigars from Nicaragua, not onto the shelves, but into your warehouse or into your storage?
Good question. From the point of ordering, or from the point of shipping?
From the point of ordering.
From the point of ordering, around sort of 60, 90 days.
90, so 3 months. It's a fair amount of time. So I guess
Yeah.
if it's going to take 3 months for cigars to arrive, it doesn't make sense for you to just order them every time you have an order over here. You need to have stock on demand and available for the retailers whenever they need it.
And it's also not fair for cigar producers because, as you know, cigars are held in aging for a considerable amount of time. You know, and cigar producers obviously project for this. And therefore, in order to work with our partners in the best way for everyone, it's best to order further in advance.
Yes.
So, which I admit has been quite, has been a challenge that I've certainly very grateful to have taken on. Actually, is the challenge of starting a new business and starting a new wholesale business with no previous projections.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, because there was nothing there. It was just, this is completely new, and it is a brand new brand for the country.
Yeah.
And but saying that, you have hit the ground running. I mean, what were you expecting? Not what you've achieved, but what were you actually expecting when you first started? Like, what did you think? What were your projected figures, or what were you thinking? How long will it take before you get X number of retailers on board? What were your thoughts?
It's a very good question. I'd say that it's happened around twice as quickly as than we were expecting.
So you were maybe expecting 6 months.
Yeah.
Before you get into any of the majors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So we're expecting.
And you managed it in 2 months, 2.5.
Yeah. And I can't take all of the credit for that.
No, well, I mean,
because that is really testament to the people working at these shops. If we look at Cigars, Mitchell Orchard. Mitchell is a true gentleman. It's a real pleasure.
Absolutely.
Real pleasure to work with him. A genuine pleasure.
I concur.
And the same with Havana House Parish,
Lovely guy.
And these, I've always said that the UK cigar industry is a really special and unique industry, small industry in a small part of the world. But I'm always amazed by the amount of great people and amazing support throughout the industry for smaller businesses. It is interesting that the majority of this has happened not because, I mean, in all fairness, if you don't mind me saying so, I don't think it's necessarily the brand itself. Like, Foundation cigars are popular and well known in the US. But in the UK, most people have never heard of it. And I think that's fair to say, because it is completely new. And when I'm talking to people, a lot of people haven't heard of Foundation, because this, historically speaking, this country has been predominantly Cuban. New World cigars, as much as they are incredible and they are becoming very popular, and we're getting to that 50-50 mark, New World cigars are still relatively new. Yeah.
And they've only been in the country for the last decade and a half or so, maybe just a decade.
Yeah.
So they're still relatively new. And Foundation as a brand, it's a new brand. Most people haven't heard of it. So what's interesting to me is that it's less the brand, and it's more, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more the relationships that you built with the people that you know. So, I mean, it doesn't, as they say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that is testament in this one. I mean, there's so many so many of the relationships that you built. I mean, Mitchell quite well, you know Paresh, and all the other brands as well. I think GU Tobacco is now shelving your cigars as well. Sounds great as well. If I'm not mistaken, Barbers, they're now stocking your cigars as well. So you've got virtually all of the major retailers in the country with your cigars on the shelves in 2 months. That's crazy.
Thank you. It's an interesting one. I think that something I've always found really lovely is that when you meet someone, and you have that common aspect of the cigar, instantly there's that barrier down. And the cigar itself, just a cigar, has been the greatest help that I could perceive. You know, if you give someone a cigar, you're giving them the gift of fire.
Yeah.
And if you give someone the gift of fire, you give them something really primal. You give them something really cleansing.
Mm.
You know, and it's taken giving a lot of cigars away, you know, because I believe that people should smoke these cigars, and once
Yes.
people have smoked these cigars, they've understood. Once people have smoked Nick's cigars and heard Nick's story, which is quite incredible,
I agree.
people really have understood the brand, and I'm very grateful for that. You know, everyone always has a great story to tell. And everyone that I've worked with so far has been testament to that.
One of the things that one of the things I really appreciate about Foundation Cigars is not just the, you can tell when someone's put a lot of time and effort into a cigar.
Yeah.
And every single person that has tried a Foundation cigar recently, people that I know, they've always had a similar experience. You know, they'll smoke on it. First inch of it, they'll be like, okay, this is interesting. And then it kicks in. Because that first inch is kind of like, it's just like a, you know, hi, how you doing kind of thing. It's a very casual hello. Yeah, it's a very casual hello. And then it just kind of just hits you and you're like, what the hell? And most of the people, most of my friends, whenever they've smoked it, they've had a similar experience to the two Foundation cigars. Mostly just the Tabernacle, because that's the one I've been talking about mostly. And I think that when you have a cigar which is actually excellent and thoroughly enjoyable, I guess it makes it easier to convince the retailers to start putting you onto their shelves.
Yeah.
Because if a cigar is popular and it's got that hype, because Foundation cigars have been on an upward trajectory for quite a while, and it's been crazy how popular they've become. I mean, who's you mentioned Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is a
Yeah,
he's Joe Rogan, right?
He loves Foundation.
He loves Foundation. So
yeah.
you have like a cigar which is building a massive amount of popularity. So
Yeah.
I guess as much as your relationships that you built with the retailers and that kind of handshake and that, you know, being able to have a sit down and talk to someone, if you have a good product, it's a lot easier to sell than it is for someone to take a chance on something which might not work and might not be that great.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that just a cigar is probably making things a lot easier for you.
Yeah, it is. You know, I'm really grateful to be working with a brand that people love, including myself, because as much as I love the cigars, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else will like them, you know. But fortunately, people have really loved the brand. It's quite, as I say, it's testament to Nick's work, and, you know, the amount of thought and time he puts into every single blend, every single cigar, the stories behind the brands themselves.
Do you know the story behind Tabernacle?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Tabernacle, the band here.
It's a beautiful band.
Yeah, the band here bears the likeness of Haile Selassie, 225th king of Abyssinia. Right, last emperor of Ethiopia.
Yes, Abyssinia was the old name, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So Haile Selassie, his direct lineage traces back to King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. I believe it's actually the second longest line of emperors after the Japanese.
Right.
And the Ethiopian church claims to hold the Ark of the Covenant, the Tabernacle. And there's a really key sort of message and story there to cigar smokers. Because if the Tabernacle held the way of life, the way to live your life, morality, it held a sense of what is true. The Tabernacle held a sense for those people of every single aspect of their life. Isn't that every cigar smoker's humidor? Isn't every cigar smoker's humidor their Tabernacle?
Interesting.
because within cigar smoking, you hold that primal connection of fire. You hold that sense of morality, you know, that sense of patience, that sense of presence and consciousness. You know, you hold that sense of actually being able to give time for yourself. You know, which that can sometimes sound selfish, but in fact we give time to ourselves in order to give greater time to others. You know,
I agree.
and so therefore every cigar smoker's humidor is their tabernacle, and it's quite an amazing thought.
That is quite an amazing thought.
It's quite an amazing thought, because you know yourself, when you get into cigars, you know, it slowly starts creeping into other aspects of your life. You know,
he's taken over everything.
Yeah, it takes over everything. And also that sense of patience, and that sense of patience sort of comes and takes over every part of your life. It's like we were saying earlier, and I'll bring it up again, the Taoist sense of Wu Wei, the Taoist, the Taoist ideology, the ideology of not forcing, of going with the tide, of cutting the wood along the grain.
Yes.
You know, every single puff you take, you're cutting the wood along the grain. You're taking the path of least resistance, but it isn't a lazy path of least resistance. It is a very intentional path of least resistance. And maybe every word you say, every conversation you have when you're smoking a cigar, you know, it's again going back to that sense of not forcing, that sense of Wu Wei, that sense that you are so intentionally taking the path of least resistance and are going with the tide.
Yeah.
And reaping when it's fullest. And that is what is encompassed within the cigar smoker's tabernacle.
It's quite an amazing way of putting it.
So yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I was wondering, in the last 2 months, you've managed to get, because in Cigars have taken on board your whole lineup of cigars.
They have, very grateful.
And if I'm not mistaken, GQ has done the same.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not allowed to tell me any information, you know, feel free to say no. But Havana House, I'm assuming they've taken on the whole line as well.
Yeah, they have,
So
very gratefully. Yeah.
You've got
Thank you.
some of the biggest retailers in the country taking on virtually all of your cigars. Would it be wrong to say that there's been some kind of luck involved, or like, you know, do you feel a bit, because having all of your cigars come off the boat, arrive in the country, and then immediately get taken on by all the retailers, that's unheard of. And the reason I say that is because retailers are very guarded when it comes to purchasing new cigars.
Yeah.
They want something that's going to work. They don't want to be messing about trying to get a million brands and trying to promote every single thing and spread themselves way too thin, because it's just not going to work, right? You know, it's just going to end up sitting in their humidor, sitting on their shelves and not doing much, and then that's just going to cost them a lot of money for no reason.
Yeah.
How did you convince everyone? Like, you know,
Well,
you say it's a little bit of luck, or a little bit of, you know, or was it just the fact that you're an incredibly charming individual and you managed to talk your way through this?
no, I think I attribute.
Without being too humble.
No, I attribute. I don't necessarily believe in luck.
Me neither.
I believe in.
I'm glad you said that.
Spotting the right circumstances.
Yes.
And I believe in spotting when it's not the right circumstance, and only taking action when it is going to work best for all involved. And I think that's been probably the biggest factor. I will say I'm under no illusion. It's a new brand in the UK, you know, and we still do, and I'm very, very ready for all the work ahead to keep Foundation going, bring in new lines, make sure, you know, we can help retailers in any way, you know, make Foundation work for them.
Absolutely, because you can't take the foot off the gas now.
No.
This is like, as much as you've now got it on the shelf, this is not the end of it.
No,
this is, if anything, this is the beginning.
It's just the very, very first step. It's just the very first step. And I'm certainly very grateful for the fact that that first step has been a successful one. And very ready for the next one. Yeah?
What is the next one?
The next one, so we're going to be obviously working on a lot of events. We've got a fantastic one here in Leeds on the 3rd of August.
Yes.
And training sessions and so forth. We will have some new lines coming in as well. And
can you say which ones, or are you still discussing that at the moment?
We can't say, but I can say that we can say in about 2 weeks.
In about 2 weeks? Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Depending on when I get this video edited, that might be a week then.
Yeah, fantastic. But yeah, there are a lot of things planned.
Can't say everything just yet, huh?
So can't say everything just yet. But hopefully we can catch up again and go through the new things. But the key thing here is that we really want to work with retailers to make sure that Foundation works for them. It's a great brand, but ultimately the cigar smoker is the utmost importance. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, without a cigar smoker, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, I guess now a lot of the hard work begins, where you're essentially having to push the brand, promote the brand as much as you can. And, so one of the best ways to do it, what would you say is the best way to do it? Would you say it's events and meeting the people firsthand? Is that what you'd say is the best option?
I'd say the best way to do it is with honesty and sincerity and with true passion.
I agree.
In everything you do, training sessions, events, we're getting together more information for cigar smokers themselves as well.
So where do you get all this information from?
Well, Nick Melillo has been a huge help there.
Yeah.
A huge help. And in terms of sort of the brand, there is a lot of information out there online.
Yes, of course.
But obviously there's no better way to learn than talking to the man himself. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess with a lot of cigar smokers, they're not going to go online and research the brand themselves. They're going to want to come to the event and actually talk to people.
Yeah,
and they want to know, 9 times out of 10, whenever you smoke a new cigar, it's because a friend has said, hey, why don't you give this a try? I mean, same with you, right? The only reason why you tried Foundation in the first place was because a friend said, try the cigar, smoke it, see what you think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's probably one of the most organic and most effective ways that a cigar brand can get out there. So would you say events are probably the most valuable resource for you?
Events and word of mouth. Word of mouth is the most valuable by far.
Yes.
That's how Foundation have achieved everything they have achieved. It's quite a unique brand in that sense.
Wow.
For a long time, as the brand started, it was achieved purely on word of mouth. With a marketing and advertising budget of 0.
Yeah.
We're talking top 25 honours in Cigar Aficionado in their first year with the very first line from word of mouth.
That's incredible.
And people like Rogan picking up the cigar out of his own choice through word of mouth. Because as much as I could talk all day, and I could talk now about the science behind Connecticut broadleaf, which is actually really fascinating. But I could talk about that for hours, but no one's gonna take better word than from their friends.
Yes. If I'm not mistaken, Ray, Connecticut broadleaf. Sorry, Ray's just sat over there at the moment. Connecticut broadleaf.
Yeah.
Favorite tobacco?
Single leaf, yes.
Yeah. It's incredible stuff.
And this cigar, the wrapper leaf?
Yeah. That is the best Connecticut broadleaf you can get. Well, used on any cigar.
It's a chunky leaf.
Really chunky. In fact, it's so thick. It's so difficult to work with.
You can actually, normally when you see a wrapper leaf on a Cuban cigar, it's like, thin, very thin, very light. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I mean, I like Cuban cigars as much as, I like a lot of other cigars. But the wrapper leaves on Cuban cigars are very thin.
Yeah.
The wrapper leaf on this cigar, it's like you put the cigar in your mouth and it's heavy.
Yeah, it's true. The thin sort of elastic, supple wrapper leaf really came around following the Dutch growing tobacco in Indonesia, Sumatra seed, in the late 19th century. And in Sumatra, the tobacco was grown in clearings in the jungle.
Yeah.
And therefore, the plants grew in the shade. Now, When the plant's grown in the shade, the leaves are much thinner. And that's where that thin, supple, easier to work with leaf comes from. The Connecticut broadleaf is a much older leaf. You know, it's very different to those usual strains of you know, the strains of wrapper. So 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, a glacial runoff created a big finger lake. You know, and then that finger lake drained and created the Connecticut River Valley. And there, that is the only place in the world you can grow Connecticut broadleaf, because of the huge layer of loam, silty loam soil, sandy soils left behind by that great glacial runoff. It means that Connecticut broadleaf has the deepest roots of any tobacco plant.
The average root length is about what? A meter and a half?
Yeah, unusual tobacco plants. So you're looking at about 10, 12 feet, I believe, with Connecticut broadleaf.
Double.
And the deeper the root, the sweeter the leaf. So
this has
really
a lot of
high
sweetness to it.
Yeah. And it's a really squat plant. It's only 4 feet tall, 4 feet tall.
Right. So the roots are significantly longer than the plant.
Yeah, and the leaves are huge. They're really long, broad, really thick,
really heavy
huge
leaves,
mineral content. And because of that,
a pain to deal with, though.
Yeah, and in fact, it has to be stalk cut. So you can't prime it.
No.
You can't start the base, start priming up the plant when you're harvesting. It has to be stalk cut because the leaf has to live off the stalk while it's curing.
Yes.
Otherwise, it will become too brittle to work with. And then it has to be fermented for a minimum, and for a wrapper leaf, it has to be fermented for a minimum of 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah, as a minimum.
Wow.
So
I mean, most wrapper leaves 6 months, 6 to 9 months, right?
Yeah.
So this is triple that. Quadruple.
It's quite amazing, isn't it? But the actual immediate effect on the palate, the immediate flavour you get on the lips is amazing. Natural sweetness, you get
Not a
those
hint
mineral
of bitterness.
tones. Yeah.
Not a single hint of bitterness, like nothing at all.
Yeah.
It's just flavour the whole way through.
Yeah.
And it is a fantastic cigar. I have to say, this is one of the best cigars that I've smoked within the last year. And I'm thoroughly impressed by it.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't take the credit.
No, of course, yes. I wish I could, right?
yeah. I really wish I could. But yeah.
It is a fantastic cigar. I mean, it's a new brand in the country. It's like I said, I'm quite stunned at the speed at which you've managed to not only bring the cigars in the country, because bringing the cigars in the country is just one thing, right? You just place an order, they all come in, and then you're just stuck with a warehouse full of cigars.
Yeah.
But to be able to get them onto the shelves in such a quick fashion, that is impressive. And I think that as a company, as one of the founders, I think it is something to be proud of.
Yeah.
And now it's a matter of getting it into the cigar smokers' hands.
Yeah.
Which I think is working. I mean, a lot of people are starting to look at, over here anyway, a lot of people are starting to look at foundation cigars. I mean, what's been the impression, what have been the cigar smokers' impressions so far, based on discussions with you, based on, you going out and meeting people? How has that been so far?
People have really loved it. I'm very grateful for that. Everything I've achieved through talking to people. That's my philosophy. You talk to people, you learn, everyone offers a new lesson. And I've learned a lot from cigar smokers who are sitting there smoking foundation as well. People's different perceptions on the cigar. And the reception has been fantastic, and I'm really grateful for the love that people are giving foundation. It's an unusual cigar, it's an unusual brand, and that isn't going to be for everyone.
No.
And no one cigar is perfect for everyone.
No, I agree,
But
when you have a cigar
fantastic.
Yeah. Are there any other particular brands or any brands that you would love to import into the country? I mean, I'm not going. This is not like a. I'm not asking in a way of saying what's next. It's more of a, what would be something that you would say, oh, I'd love to have that cigar on the shelves in the UK as well?
It's a good question. Well, as an importer, as a distributor, we're really quite unusual in the fact that we only work with Foundation and we don't plan on bringing anyone else in.
Right.
We're working on some other things in the cigar industry in the UK.
Are you allowed to say what you're working
Unfortunately,
on?
I
Not
can't
just yet.
yet.
No,
I can't
fair
yet.
enough.
But this is the first stage, this is the first project, and this is the real sort of core of who we are. So we are quite unusual in that sense. You know, there are thousands of great cigars out there that should be coming into the UK by all intents. And I do hope that people bring in the right brands.
Are there any particular brands that make you think that could be something I'd love to work with? I mean, not saying that you will, or, you know, not going to hold you to anything in any way, shape or form, but just interested to know what you know, what's on your radar.
That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that. That's the, do you know, I can't really answer that question now, and I'll tell you why.
Go on.
Right? It's because there are many cigars that I really love. There are many cigars that I think fantastic cigars. But until I would sit down and speak to the person who made those cigars, I couldn't really see what those cigars are about.
Right.
I couldn't really see, tell where the passion is coming from in that particular brand and so forth.
It's a very diplomatic answer, that one.
Yeah, it's also, that's really important from a point of view of selling cigars. Because a cigar can be fantastic, but really people can feel the passion and feel the amount of sort of effort and the amount of love that's gone into that cigar. And you can't really assess it until you know that. Yeah.
Fair enough. But you are working on some new things at the moment, which is good.
Yeah, yeah.
Can't go into details just yet, but that's
No,
understandable. No, that's completely respectable. I wouldn't press you on that either. But it's good to know that, as successful as you have been so far with Foundation, there are new things on the horizon as well, which myself and fellow cigar smokers can be excited about.
Yeah.
Would you say later on this year, or you know, is there a timeline when people will know what the next thing is? Or
So there will be things happening later on this year.
Okay, so it is this year.
And there will be sort of bigger things happening in 2024.
Okay.
So all tied in with Foundation, actually. You know, in that sense with those projects. So yeah. But that's as much as I can give at the moment.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's perfectly reasonable. That's perfectly reasonable. As I said, I'm not going to press you on any answer that you're not allowed to say just yet. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see what you do next.
Thank you.
It's been, it's remarkable how quickly Foundation has been able to. I'm going to say crack the market in the UK, because the UK market is a tough nut to crack.
Yeah.
It is.
But the work's not over yet.
No, it's not. It's not over just yet. I'm not going to say that you can. The finishing flag is up there and everything, and you've done everything. No, we're still at the early stages, but the first biggest hurdle, I guess, is to convince the retailers, and I think that you've managed that in such an incredible way.
Thank you.
I can't see Foundation not becoming popular amongst many cigar aficionados, especially considering the love that Foundation has in the US.
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of the love that people have in the US for cigars does translate over here, and we've seen that with many of the popular brands.
It didn't always. It wasn't always the case.
It wasn't always the case. No, it wasn't always the case. But as soon as a brand becomes extremely popular in the US, then people in the UK are going to be more likely to be interested in it. And this cigar is definitely special.
Fantastic.
It really is. It is quite an amazing cigar. And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for traveling all the way up from London
Thank
to
you.
see
And thank you
me and
for
Ray
hosting
today.
me.
And I really appreciate it. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Hey, I want to say thank you very much to yourself and to Ray for being absolutely fantastic hosts. It's a beautiful shop, and it's been a real pleasure actually. It's been a really lovely day and fantastic to sit and speak to you. So thank you for the honour.
Thank you for the insight on what it takes to become an importer in an incredibly tough market. So
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.